Hello, it's me, Sarah. So I'm going to try my best to explain the law of love, which was a very prominent tenet of the cult. Almost everything stemmed off of this law of love. Um, so, um, just to reference where it was taken from, derived from the cult, from the Bible, excuse me, in relation to the cult, is a verse in, sorry, I'm on my bed and the dog is moving. It's a verse in the New Testament. I forget the address for the verse. But anyways, the verse is, it's Jesus speaking, and he says, all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two laws hang all the laws of the prophets. So essentially, what our understanding was the Ten Commandments, all the old biblical law, was all replaced by the law of love. Now, the definition of love grew and built over time and ended up having a lot of variations on what exactly it entailed. To try to keep it fairly simple, God is love, love is sex. So if discipline is love, love, God, sex, everything overlapped and intertwined. So many things were justified by this law of love. And this was a main basis that was in the Bible, and this is how it got twisted and perverted within the cult. Probably the biggest part was when it involved children, as it often did. I am going to try to do some editing and show some stuff maybe over here only. Maybe try to put some images from some of their publications that will maybe help you understand a little bit. So sex or sexual involvement with children was considered a way of showing God's love to children. Sharing your spouse was a way to show God's love to other single people, that or other couples. It was a way to show love as opposed to just giving someone a hug. You would have sex with them. A lot of pressure was put on people to have sex with other people, even if they didn't want to. And of course, this was just within adults. But children who are too young to consent, they cannot consent. It is always rape when it involves children. Children, very young children, were assaulted. They were raped. Oh yes, if you like my content, like and subscribe. Horrible transition there. Yes, wonderful content about raping children. There was one instance that I personally am one of the lucky ones. I was never actually raped. However, there was plenty of sexual assault things and inappropriate sexual interactions that I experienced, plus I witnessed plenty of things happening to other people, but I won't tell other people's stories. That is theirs to tell unless I am given specific permission that I am allowed to share them. One instance that I have is when I was about 7 or 8. There was an adult man who was just in a sheet. It was not uncommon to see adults walking around naked or minimally clothed, for what it was Brazil, which is fairly hot climate, but also nudity was considered very much okay around children, including children that were not your own. This adult, I believe I was having a conversation, I don't even remember with who, but I was asking what the differences between boys and girls were. Like what exactly makes us so different. And this adult man told me to touch his private area so I could understand what he had that I did not have. Again, I was about 7 or 8. His part was flaccid. It did not, I didn't perform any oral or manual anything on it, but I was touching it through the sheet, and I didn't see anything wrong with it. Mom came across and was like, okay, we're done with this right now. And that was the end of it. I didn't see anything wrong with that interaction at the time because that was a very normal thing. Adults would touch girls, boys in inappropriate ways, and we saw it as normal. So those were normal things. To be lined up with other girls and have your shirts taken off for someone to fondle your top bare chest area and tell you how good or bad your chest area is not appropriate. That also happened in that same house when I was 8. Oh, I'm about to sneeze. Maybe I can figure out how to edit that out. Am I being weird, lady? Discipline was another thing that was a way of showing God's love, because, being a good, productive adult and being trained properly and being disciplined properly. And I don't just mean discipline like, go sit in the corner for a minute or have a stern talking to, or, grounding, or just explaining something to a child in order to educate them and talk to them like they're a human being. No, I'm talking about, getting the switch out in the yard. I remember someone very close to me being spanked. They were maybe 7, 8 years old, and they were being spanked until the wooden spoon broke. We had a teacher that would use a yardstick and thwack us on the head if we said anything, did anything that she didn't like. And I don't even know what her rules were. Just if she disapproved of something from across the room, I swear she'd, catch you. And if you, for every word you misspelled on your spelling test, you would get a rap across the knuckles. So you really, we were learning how to write. I was like 4 years old, and it's great that I was able to write, but that's not a great way to teach. There was a lot of really bad things. There also, this law of love evolved over the years. It evolved into FFing, which will be a whole separate video, which was essentially prostitution for Jesus, where women were made to use their bodies as a way to win more souls to God, I guess. Also, they did use it a lot in order to recruit influential men that could help protect the cult. We had a woman who was married to the head of the FBI in Brazil, and she would get all sorts of special treatment within the cult. She would have her own separate, little home on our property. She didn't have to attend anything in the cult. She could come and go. She had a regular job. She had her own car. She had so many special privileges because she had married her fish, because they were called fish instead of Johns. So many children were born who never knew who their father was, because the mother didn't know who their father was, because they were out. Yeah. When I was quite young, I remember seeing mass orgies, seeing many, many, many adults having sex, just lots of people, going to get a glass of water late at night when I was 4 years old, and seeing just piles of naked bodies and sounds and groans and the smells of sex. And this was a normal thing. It looked like a chaotic mess of people, and as a small child, I didn't exactly know what was happening, but it would be explained to me, this is sex, and this is love, and this is a godly thing. So I was very familiar with sex at a very young age and overexposure. I'm very much for being open and honest with children, but there are things that are appropriate and inappropriate for children to be exposed to. That was definitely inappropriate. Punishments, there was always this really weird double standard for, well, double, triple standard. I mean, men were dominant, men were at the top of the food chain, women were beneath that, and children were way beneath that. Um, this law of love, in later years, after Zerby came in charge, she had a new twist to it, which was the Loving Jesus movement. Shortly before that, there was the Go for the Gold, which Go for the Gold was, that had to do with contraception and creating more children. But it was all these things kind of stem off of the law of love. There was also, oh, there's too many. There's so many things that stem off of this singular concept of love. Love equals godliness, and anything that can be related to godliness, such as your body is a temple for God, so therefore anything you put in your body, like, needs to be appropriate. So, sugar, you have to keep sugars to a minimum. There was a lot of foods we weren't allowed to eat because we were trying to keep our body as a temple. Tattoos were not allowed. Piercings were frowned upon. You could have like one piercing, that was it. There was, oh my God, this is so rambly because there's so many different things that stemmed away. The Loving Jesus, okay, let's talk about that one just a little bit. Loving Jesus came out shortly before I left, so in the mid-90s, which was right around the time that Berg passed and Zerby took over. And the Loving Jesus thing was, essentially, Jesus, they always had a concept of Jesus as a sexy Jesus, as a young and handsome Jesus. Never so much the, like, aloof or sort of saintly type Jesus. That wasn't the way they portrayed him. They portrayed him more as sexy Jesus, as young, and as a sexual being. And there was lots of publications about how, Jesus got around, and why do you think he had Mary Magdalene and all the other women there, and things like that. So that, we can debate over all that. I'm just explaining where the cult stood with that. And so when the Loving Jesus publications stuff came out, it was really close to when I was leaving. And it was one of the things where I was just like, no. You were supposed to imagine Jesus being present with you for any sexual activity. Whether you were going solo, you were never solo because Jesus was there pleasuring you, was the way you were supposed to perceive it. If you were with your partner, which of course would be the opposite sex, because you were not allowed to be gay in the cult. Women could sleep with other women, but only if another man was involved. They couldn't just be a lesbian. That was not allowed. Women could be bi, men could not be. Men had to be straight as straight, or at least live their life as a straight man. I will talk about their homophobia at a future date, but that was how it was. And so if you were with your partner, it would be a man and a woman and Jesus, which there was a lot of problem around that because the cult was really homophobic. And then all of a sudden, men were supposed to be imagining themselves when they would be masturbating that they were fucking Jesus, who is a man. And they're like, isn't that not that seems like gay sex? And I don't even remember how they explained that away, that wasn't gay because Jesus is, I guess, supposed to be androgynous or something like that, but he's still the man. And I think the man was then supposed to see themselves as a woman in that scenario, which has got to be a mind fuck. When you've been in a cult for a few decades where they're so homophobic, and then suddenly men are supposed to imagine that they're fucking another man, and that's supposed to bring you closer to God. It was just really bizarre. And like, what if I just want to pleasure myself and not imagine another person? I mean, Jesus has been dead for a lot of years. Like, zombie Jesus, I need to imagine I'm fucking him. Man, shit just kept getting weirder and weirder. And the worst part of all of this law of love stuff was how many things were twisted and conformed in order to involve children. In the earlier years, when the mass orgies and the big sharing things was going on, sharing was a term for sexual sharing. So they would have sharing schedules where they would put a schedule up and you were paired with different people. And now if you made any kind of stink about your preferences, you don't like, we tend to be attracted to some people over other people, whether it's for physical appearance or reasons that, you have a good communication, you have good connections. Some people just gross you out. And if you made any form of stink, and by stink I mean just expressing your preferences, chances were you would intentionally be put with the person you least wanted to be with in order to break you, because they had that control over you. And this was within adults and children. Young children. I know at least as young as 8, possibly younger, but 8, 9, 10-year-olds were regularly involved, including, of course, any older children as well. Lucky for me, by the time I was at the ripe old age of 8 years old, they had mostly stopped these practices, and they had upped the age of consent for them to be around 12-ish. It still was a loosely applied thing. They never rescinded their belief system that very young children should be involved. They never said that was wrong. They just stopped practicing it on a grander scale, mostly because of fear that they were going to be stopped by authorities. Because at that point, we had started having raids by authorities in various countries, and so they knew that was something that if a kid ratted on them, they would lose custody of their children. And that was their best way. Like, we were supposed to be the soldiers of the end time. We were supposed to be the ones that were going to fight and die, and like, we were the ones that they were brainwashing from birth. And so if they lost us, their future, it would ruin everything, which what they ended up doing was losing us all anyways, because, you rape and torture lots of children over a long period of time. Eventually, if those kids see that they have any option to leave, they will do so. And that's what a lot of us did. Most of us did. The cult is still in operation to this day, but it is mostly an online thing. It is no longer in person, but there are still people that are committed to it. There are many people who still believe in the tenets. You can still find this stuff, and there are so many children whose lives were ruined. We have, I've talked about this before, an extraordinarily high number of suicides from us cult kids. Pretty much all of us have some form of coping strategy, and a lot of them are not the healthiest. For instance, I'm a smoker. Smoking has been something that helps alleviate stress for me. This mass form of abuse, where our entire environment was this very abusive environment, where things like assault and rape and severe punishments were seen as normal and were acceptable, created an atmosphere of constant trauma. Even when we had good moments within that, there was always this overshadowing of this trauma and this unhealthy atmosphere, this hypersexualized environment. And that is what we grew up in, and that is the trauma that we came from. And it destroyed a lot of lives. So that is, I guess, as close to trying to explain this law of love. I'm probably gonna like do 20 takes on this because I don't even know. I normally just record and upload, but this is such a big subject. I'm gonna have to delve into it more deeply in future videos and try to break down things a bit more, but to try to give you a bit of an overview, an example of some things that were done. The law of love. Yeah, so I think I'm just going to call this a video and get high, because that's one of my coping strategies. Y'all have a day. Hopefully it's better than mine. Ciao.